Hello everybody, welcome back to Book of Kings, where we discuss topics such as history, religion, philosophy, psychology, culture, and more, and the way that they all interact with one another. Don't forget to like, leave a comment, subscribe, and hit the bell icon to receive a notification every time I release a new video. Hope you enjoy. The term caliphate may carry some notoriety with it in recent years, given its association with the Islamic State, which proclaimed itself a modern-day caliphate in 2014. However, the institution of the caliphate is one that spans the course of nearly 1,400 years and includes some of the most powerful and important empires the world has ever seen. Of the many Islamic empires which have existed throughout history, 4 are generally recognized as caliphates, those being the Rashidun Caliphate, the Umayyad Caliphate, the Abbasid Caliphate, and the Ottoman Empire, with occasional competitors challenging them for the title. From the origins of the caliphate following the death of Muhammad, the first 4 caliphs, or successors to Muhammad, known as the Rashidun, or rightly guided caliphs, would create the first caliphate in Muslim history, the Rashidun Caliphate. This caliphate would be short-lived, soon being replaced by the Umayyad Caliphate, which would transform the caliphate into a hereditary monarchy and create the largest empire the world had seen up until that point. Despite their immense power and wealth, the Umayyads would breed widespread dissatisfaction amongst the population which they ruled over as a result of their policies of discrimination toward non-Arab Muslims and the forceful suppression of Shias. This would result in the outbreak of revolution. Revolt would break out in the Khorasan region of modern-day Iran, Afghanistan, and Central Asia, led primarily by Shias and ethnic Persians, culminating in the Abbasid Revolution, which ousted the Umayyads from power and placed the Abbasid dynasty in its place, beginning the 3rd caliphate in Islamic history, the Abbasid Caliphate. Following the overthrow of the Umayyads and the mass execution of the Umayyad royal family, one member of the royal family, al-Rahman I, would escape, flee to the Iberian Peninsula, and set up an emirate or principality there based in Cordoba, known as the Emirate of Cordoba, where he would continue the rule of the Umayyad dynasty. The Abbasids would reverse the Umayyad policies of discrimination towards non-Arab Muslims, resulting in a significant increase in the number of non-Muslims who would convert to Islam, beginning the process of transforming the caliphate from an empire of primarily Christians, Zoroastrians, and Jews ruled by an Arab Muslim minority to a multi-ethnic Muslim empire. Despite the improved conditions which non-Arab Muslims experienced following the Abbasid Revolution, they would quickly turn on another group which had been part of the coalition which brought them to power, and that would be the Shias, who the Abbasids would disavow and forcefully suppress. The Abbasids were known for being patrons of the arts and sciences, fostering a thriving intellectual environment, with the 5th Abbasid Caliph, Harun al-Rashid, famously establishing the House of Wisdom in Baghdad, the city they had built as their new capital, initiating what is known as the Translation Movement, where, being continued by his son al-Ma'mun, esteemed scholars such as renowned philosopher Al-Kindi were contracted to translate major scholarly texts of philosophy and science from around the world into the Arabic language. This ushered in the period known as the Islamic Golden Age, which witnessed the Islamic world achieve unprecedented levels of cultural achievement in the areas of science, philosophy, art, and technology, widely regarded as having influenced the Renaissance in Europe. Continuing his father's commitment to knowledge and reason, Ma'mun would patronize the Mu'tazila school of Islamic rationalism. This would bring him into conflict with traditionalist Islamic scholars, namely Ahmad ibn Hanbal, the founder of the conservative Hanbali school of Islamic jurisprudence. This would begin the Mihna period, or period of religious persecution within the Muslim community. Ahmad ibn Hanbal would assert that the Quran, believed by Muslims to be the verbatim word of God, was uncreated and therefore co-eternal with God. The Mu'tazilis would assert that being that the Quran is God's speech, God must naturally precede his own speech, and therefore the Quran could not be co-eternal with God. Al-Ma'mun would demand that Hanbal accept the Mu'tazili position and recant on his assertion that the Quran is co-eternal with God. Upon his refusal, Hanbal would be imprisoned by al-Ma'mun. Ma'mun's next 2 successors would continue this position and their patronage of the Mu'tazila school, with Ma'mun's successor, al-Mu'tasim, subjecting Hanbal to flogging until he abandoned his position. Hanbal would refuse this demand, being flogged until he passed out from the pain, leading to public backlash, resulting in the release of Hanbal. The Mihna period would finally come to an end under the reign of Caliph al-Mutawakkil, who would remove his support from the Mu'tazilis and order an end to the debate regarding the Quran's co-eternality with God or lack thereof. While the Muslim world under the Rashiduns and the Umayyads existed as one unified empire, it was under the Abbasids that we would see the political decentralization of the Caliphate from one unified empire to various autonomous polities, which accepted the nominal authority of the Abbasid Caliph while exercising de facto independence, with the territory ruled directly by the Abbasid Caliphs becoming confined primarily to modern-day Iraq. Notable examples of these de facto independent states include the Samanid dynasty ruling over eastern Iran and Central Asia, and the Tulunid dynasty ruling over Egypt. Amongst the political fragmentation of the Caliphate, one new power would rise in North Africa, which would challenge not only the practical, political authority of the Caliphate, but also their religious and spiritual authority. This new power would be the Shia Fatimid dynasty, whose leader, Abdallah, would proclaim himself Caliph, a descendant of the Shia Imams and the current Imam himself, as well as the long-awaited Muslim messianic figure, the Mahdi, changing his name to al-Mahdi Billah, creating a rival caliphate to that of the Abbasids, known as the Fatimid Caliphate, the first and only Shia caliphate in history. The Fatimids would eventually gain control of Egypt, making Cairo their capital, as well as gaining control of the three holiest sites in Islam, Mecca, Medina, and Jerusalem. It was also around this time that another Shia dynasty would rise to power in the west of modern-day Iran, and that would be the Buyid dynasty. The Buyids would eventually gain control of Iraq, placing the Abbasid Caliphate under their direct control. Despite this, in order to avoid causing discontent amongst the largely Sunni populace that they ruled over, the Buyids would not abolish the Caliphate, allowing the Abbasids to continue to maintain their role as caliphs, albeit now in a purely religious role with no real political power. These events, coupled with the rise of the Fatimid Caliphate and various smaller Shia emirates or principalities, would mark a period known as the Shia century. It was around this time that another rival caliphate would emerge, challenging the caliphal authority of the Abbasids. After the Umayyad dynasty had fled to Spain and set up an emirate based in Cordoba, continuing the line of the Umayyad dynasty, current emir al-Rahman III would proclaim himself caliph in 929, establishing the Caliphate of Cordoba. And in a similar fashion to how Baghdad would become a center of learning and culture under the Abbasids, Cordoba would also become renowned for its science, philosophy, and art under the exiled Umayyad dynasty. Returning to our discussion on the rise of Shi'ism and the diminishing power of the Abbasid caliphs, since coming under the dominion of the Buyids, the position of the Abbasid caliphs had largely been reduced to that of a symbolic role. This would all change with the rise of a new caliph who would use his role as caliph to challenge Shia dominance and redefine Sunni Islam. This caliph would be al-Qadir. Prior to al-Qadir, Sunni Islam was largely defined in negative terms in relation to minority variants of Islam, as Sunnis were those who were not Shias, Harijites, Mu'tazilis, etc. Al-Qadir would change all of this by defining Sunnism in its own right as a distinct creed in Islam with its own distinct doctrine. Al-Qadir would first take on this objective with the publication of a famous treatise in 1011 known as the Baghdad Manifesto, where he would challenge the stated lineage of the Fatimid caliphs to the Shia Imams, a lineage which has been widely called into question by modern scholarship as well as during its time. He would follow this by publishing a document in 1018 known as the Risala al-Qadiriyya, or the Qadiri Creed, where he would rebuke Shia and Mu'tazili Islam, providing Sunni Islam with a distinct creed based upon the Hanbali school of Islamic law, deriving from the previously mentioned Islamic jurist Ahmad ibn Hanbal. These publications would have a profound impact on Muslim society, ushering in an era known as the Sunni Revival, where Sunnism would reassert its position within the Muslim world. Qadir would gain patronage from powerful Islamic ruler Mahmud of Ghazni, ruler of the Ghaznavid dynasty in eastern Iran and the Indian subcontinent, who would declare himself Sultan, or strength of the Caliphate. Al-Qadir's son, Al-Qaim, would carry on his father's mission, gaining the allegiance of the rising megapower that was the Seljuk Sultanate, calling on them to liberate the Caliphate from Shia Buyid domination. The Seljuks would sweep through Central Asia and the Iranian plateau, conquering the Buyids and once again bringing the Abbasid Caliphate under Sunni dominion. The Seljuks would also spread the boundaries of Islam beyond the current borders of its time, famously conquering the Anatolian Peninsula, or modern-day Turkey, from the Byzantine Empire in the Battle of Manzikert in 1071. This would also famously set the spark for the beginning of the Crusades, whereby crusaders from Christian Europe would march through Anatolia into the Levant, setting up crusader states along the way, conquering the holy city of Jerusalem. Continuing along in the vision of Al-Qadir and Al-Qaim of establishing a revived Sunni orthodoxy, Seljuk vizier or minister Nizam al-Mulk would play a foundational role in overseeing the political and legal end of the Sunni Revival. He would oversee the establishment of the first of many theological schools of higher education, known as Nizamiyas, being named after him, and would contract renowned Muslim philosopher, jurist, and theologian Al-Ghazali to teach at his school in Baghdad, with Ghazali leading the theological end of the Sunni Revival. Following the deaths of Nizam al-Mulk and his sultan, the Seljuk Malik Shah, we would see the division of the Seljuk Sultanate amongst Malik Shah's family members, resulting in multiple semi-independent emirates under the broader Seljuk umbrella. It was during this period that the Abbasid caliphs would take advantage of this political fragmentation in order to assert their political independence for the first time since coming under the control of the Buyids, regaining control of their former territory corresponding roughly to modern-day Iraq in 1157, while still receiving the spiritual and religious allegiance of the various sultans and emirs. Despite the fragmentation of the Seljuk lands, the mission of establishing religious schools in order to spread Sunni orthodoxy would continue, notably under one particular Seljuk leader named Nur ad-Din, Atabeg or Turkic nobleman of the Zengid dynasty, who would build numerous schools throughout his territory in Syria, in addition to playing a major role in the Second Crusade. His influence would be carried on through his subjects, Kurdish generals Shirkuh and his nephew Saladin. After protecting the weak and declining Fatimid Caliphate from a crusader assault, the Fatimids would appoint Shirkuh as vizier or minister. Following his death, his nephew Saladin would be entrusted with the position of vizier, making him the most powerful figure after the Fatimid Caliph. As vizier, Saladin would be openly pro-Sunni, building Sunni schools and establishing Sunni judges within the Shia Fatimid Caliphate. Following the death of Fatimid Caliph al-Adid in 1171, Saladin would become de facto ruler of the Caliphate, and at the behest of Nur ad-Din would officially throw his allegiance behind the Abbasid Caliphate, bringing the Fatimid Caliphate, the arch-rival to the Abbasid Caliphate, to an end. Following the death of his master, Nur ad-Din, Saladin would be free to pursue his own aspirations, founding his own dynasty throughout Egypt, Syria, and the Hijaz, and earning the title of Sultan from the Abbasid Caliphs, beginning the Ayyubid Sultanate. Saladin would go on to reconquer Jerusalem and much of the Holy Land from the Crusaders, delivering a resounding victory for the Muslim world, making him one of the most celebrated leaders in Islamic history. The military and political success of Saladin would not continue under his successors, who would squabble amongst each other, resulting in the political fragmentation of the Ayyubid realm, with their territories being divided amongst various local emirs. The Ayyubids would eventually be overthrown by their Turkic Mamluks, or slave soldiers, who would establish the Mamluk Sultanate. It was during this period that the Abbasid caliphs and the Muslim world at large would face the most devastating blow in its history. That would be the Mongol Conquests. First conquering the territory of the sultans of the Khwarezmian Empire based in Central Asia and the Iranian plateau, the Mongols would make their way to the domain of the Abbasid Caliphate in modern-day Iraq and their capital of Baghdad. The Abbasids would be utterly devastated. The Mongols would destroy the city of Baghdad, massacre its inhabitants, destroy the House of Wisdom and most of the literature within it, so much so that legends tell of the Tigris turning black from the ink of the books thrown in it, and would kill the last Abbasid Caliph of Baghdad, al-Mustasim. It is this date, in 1258, which is often seen as the end of the Abbasid Caliphate, and more broadly, the Islamic Golden Age as a whole. Pushing further south through Syria towards Egypt, the Mongols would ultimately be defeated by the Mamluk forces led by Baybars in the Battle of Ain Jalut in 1260, the first instance in history where Mongol expansion was permanently stopped in its tracks. Following their victory, the Mamluks would provide refuge to surviving members of the Abbasid dynasty within their domains. Being military rulers and in need of political legitimacy, the Mamluks would re-establish the institution of the Caliphate in Cairo. However, this would be an entirely symbolic position devoid of any real power. While the Abbasid Caliphs would continue to exist in Cairo, a new power would rise in the Anatolian peninsula of modern-day Turkey. Tune in next time to learn more. Thank you for watching. This has been another Book of Kings video. Don't forget to like, leave a comment, subscribe, and hit the bell icon to receive a notification every time I release a new video.